on that video into Ukraine. And as Matthew was pointing out, the fastest way for an invasion force to get to the Ukrainian capital of Kiev is exactly from Belarus. There's a pretty new road that actually the Ukrainians built to try and increase traffic, to try and increase trade with Belarus when the relations were still better. It really is a very quick way to get to the capital of Kiev. So this is definitely a very worrying development that we're seeing here. And of course, on top of that, we have to keep in mind that there is also this large Russian force that's on Russian territory, where there are obviously a lot of people who believe, as Jim Sciutto was pointing out, that some of these airstrikes that we've been seeing, the missile strikes, where we've heard them launch from here, from this very location in Belgorod, that those are there to soften up the possible the battlefield for a possible ground invasion that could come. And you know, one of the things that we saw in the past couple of days, as we've been roaming around the border here between Ukraine and Russia, is we saw forces that certainly looked like Russian special forces, and those in many cases would be the first to go into an area to then set the stage for a larger invasion of ground forces, of some of the many armored forces that we've also seen here. So certainly some worrying developments, and the CCTV video definitely remarkable to see that apparently there are, on a large scale now, foreign forces invading Ukraine. Don.
Oh, Frederick, I want you to respond to this, because we're getting information that Russian President Vladimir Putin and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko spoke by phone Thursday. Belarusian state news agency Belta reported the morning Russia launched military strikes against Ukraine. At about 5 a.m. today, a telephone conversation took place between the presidents of Belarus and Russia, during which Vladimir Putin informed his Belarusian counterpart about the situation on the border with Ukraine and in Donbass. Delta cited the Belarusian presidential press service as saying. So this sort of bolsters what you were saying about those troops and whether they're Belarusian and what is exactly going on. The two men spoke not long ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it certainly bolsters that. And one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that both Putin and Lukashenko, they are very, very close to one another. Definitely, Alexander Lukashenko, after some of the protests that happened in Belarus in 2020, is pretty much dependent on Vladimir Putin to actually stay in office. And one of the other questions I actually asked Lukashenko last week when we were at those large-scale military drills where he showed up is whether or not he would actually support a move by Vladimir Putin to invade Ukraine. The very question, the very scenario that we're seeing right now. And he simply said that the two countries obviously are very close to one another, and that he would support Vladimir Putin in pretty much anything that he does, that the two countries would support one another because they are in a military union, as he put it. Now, whether or not Belarusian forces are also among that invasion force that's currently apparently moving into Ukraine, that's something that we have yet to confirm, but certainly the Russians would not be able to do that if they didn't have the permission of Alexander Lukashenko, which in any case they would get because he's dependent on Vladimir Putin, but also with the aid of the Belarusian military as well, to use staging areas within Belarus, to use military bases within Belarus, and also to use transport within Belarus as well. So, you know, one of the things that the Biden administration said a couple of weeks ago, they said that Belarus would pay a very heavy price if it were to aid Russia in invading Ukraine, or if an invasion were launched from Belarusian territory. Certainly that seems to be the case. And I think also, Don, the other thing is that it's coming to light as we're reporting here just how big this invasion is, just how widespread it is. If you look at the amount of kilometers, of miles that Ukrainian forces now need to defend against what appear to be two armies right now, thousands of miles of border. I traveled part of that just today, and it was a very, very big distance that you need to travel. This is something that where you really see Ukraine essentially getting bullied by Russia and with Belarus obviously in many ways being the accomplice here. It certainly is. It's hard to overstate just in what a difficult position Ukraine is in right now, with that extra caveat now of those forces moving in from Belarus. Don.
All right. Thank you, Frederick Pleiken. I appreciate that. I want someone who can help us sort of get a synopsis of everything here, to break it all down for us. Steve Hall is joining us, the former chief of Russian operations for the CIA. Just as you've been sitting here very patiently for the last couple of minutes, you have seen the live stream of troops arriving through the border of Belarus. The president of Belarus, Vladimir Putin, speaking, Zelensky and Biden speaking. There's a lot blasts at the airport. There's a lot going on. What's your assessment of what you're seeing? Is this a bigger scale operation than anticipated?
Well, Don, where we are right now, I think, is sort of literally in the fog of war. I mean, we're hours into this, and so there's a lot that remains clear. But I think there's a lot of things that are also actually unclear. But there's a lot of things that are becoming more clear very quickly. I think there may have been a question initially as to whether or not Putin was going to go basically simply into the Donbass region or into the parts of the Donbass region which are controlled by his proxies. That has, of course, begun to happen. We have seen the softening of military targets in Ukraine in preparation for that. But the thing that got my attention most was what's happening further north and west in the Belarusian border, because it could have been a scenario whereby Putin may have gone into the Donbass region and said, okay, I've got what President Biden is referring to the beginning of sanctions. So if I just go as far as the Donbass and then stop, will it end well for me? Will there just be light sanctions, or will there just be these beginnings of sanctions? But it's very difficult to maintain that position and say, I'm only going into Donbass, when you see not only the forces that are surrounding Ukraine, but now you've got we have reporting of forces coming in from Belarus into Ukraine. So this is no longer just about the Donbass. This is something much larger now. And I think that's also what's triggered the much more robust, we would hope, economic and other types of sanctions against Russia. So there may have been an initial thought that it was going to be limited, perhaps, but now that it's happening all over Ukraine, I think it's become more and more clear that it's more of a worst-case scenario. He's actually going in from multiple different angles, if what we're seeing in Belarus is any indication.
Do you think that this galvanizes the NATO, or U.S., our allies, or people around the country who are opposed to what is happening in Ukraine? I'm not sure, beyond very heavy sanctions, what can be done, but does this at least help on that front, that it brings people together in order to try to at least limit what's happening?
I think at least psychologically, there was, I think in the West we have this tendency to be always optimistic and always thinking, I mean, you hear it from our politicians, we're not closing the door on diplomacy, despite the fact that Vladimir Putin is it's really not speeches he's making. He's ranting about how Ukraine shouldn't even exist. And yet, in spite of that, we have a lot of people saying, well, maybe it'll all work out in the end. I think now at least we begin to see that it's probably not all going to work out in the end, and that stronger action needs to be taken. One of the issues, however, is that I think Vladimir Putin learned very early on and figured out early on that, by the words of the president of our country and other NATO nations, there are going to be no boots on the ground in Ukraine. So what does that leave us with? It only leaves us essentially with the strongest of sanctions that we can come up with, and we don't know whether Putin is going to react to that or not.
We've had former secretaries of state, former defense secretaries on who really alluded to Putin's state of mind, especially after the pandemic and so on and so forth. In his speech, where he says that he was conducting a special military operation and its goal was to protect the people that have been subjected to abuse and genocide in Kiev regime for 8 years, also saying that this was a special military operation just for Donbass. But he's been repeating these baseless claims of genocide in the country's Donbass region, and then also saying that he wants to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. What is this all about? Because none of it's making sense. Even earlier in the week, giving justification for an invasion by using a history that does not exist of Russia and the Soviet Union.
Again, Don, I think this is sort of one of the problems that we have here in the West, is looking through a Western lens and trying to make sense out of what Vladimir Putin says.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. It does to him, though. And it does to, in some sense, to the Russians.
He says that he was conducting a special military
largest
operation.
target
Its
for
goal
that
was to
ranting
protect
speech
people
that he
that
gave the
been
other night
subjected to
was the Russian people
abuse
to
and
sort of
genocide
prepare
in
them
Kiev
for
regime
this.
for 8 years.
In the
Also
West, we
saying
see
that
this as a
special
transparent
military operation
mechanism
just
by
for
which he's
Donbass.
going to
But
set
he's
up a
been repeating
provocation
these
in the
baseless
Donbass and then
claims
say,
of
I've got to go
genocide
save
in the
those poor
country's
Russians
Donbass
that I
region.
myself, by the
And
way,
then also
issued a
saying
bunch
that
of
he wants to
passports to not too many years ago to
demilitarize
make them
and
Russians.
denazify
But now I got to go in and save
Ukraine.
them. The thing that concerns me most
What
is not
is
the
this all about? Because
demilitarization
none of it's
part of
making
it,
sense. Even
but it's the
earlier,
denazization part
in the
of
week,
it.
giving
And the reason that
justification
concerns me is because
for
whenever
an
Vladimir Putin
invasion
or anybody in the Kremlin
by
talks
using a
about
history that does
how
not
Kiev
exist
is run by
of
Nazis,
Russia,
he's talking
and the
about
Soviet
the
Union.
government. He's not just talking about
Again,
the Donbass.
Don, I
He's
think
not
this
just
is
talking
sort
about
of one of the
trying to
problems
help
we have here
these
in the West, is looking
make-believe
through a
countries that
Western
he
lens
helped
and
create
trying to make
in
sense out of
Donetsk
what the state of
and
mind.
Luhansk. what he's talking about when he talks about Nazis, he's talking about SDF, and that put Russia foretell is sort of decapitation type of operation here. You get a lot of military stuff going on, and then he sends folks in to basically take care of the government.
Quickly, because I need to get to other stuff, but I want to ask you, as you were listening to the sirens, the airstrike sirens going off in Kyiv, I heard you, I saw you sit up and take notice, and wow. What were you thinking when you heard that?
What I was thinking was there have been so many places that I've served overseas that are close to Russia where things like this have happened. And a lot of times right after a huge, massive force that is certainly larger than anything that the country that is being attacked can respond to, which is the situation that Ukraine finds itself in, sometimes the only thing that's left is for the emergency personnel to hit the air siren button. It's almost an act of, I'm not going to say it's an act of surrender, and they're doing their jobs, they're trying to help protect civilians. But really, when you've got the Russian military crushing down on you, what else can you do but hit that button and hope for the best?
Yeah. The former chief of Russian operations for the CIA, Steve Hall. Thank you. We appreciate it, Steve. Stick around. You stick around as well. We have a live picture of what's happening in Ukraine. I would imagine Kyiv is somewhere up there. And this is what's happening now. It is 7:41 in the morning in Kyiv, Ukraine. We have heard we've heard airstrike sirens, we've heard explosions. Some of them are saying that it is indeed airstrikes. Some of our folks who are on the ground. And it is a full-scale, according to the U.S., and as you can see, one would surmise, a full-scale invasion of Russia by Ukraine and possibly Belarus. At least we see military forces crossing the border from Belarus. Another picture, 7:42 in the morning, traffic on the streets. People are waking up to what is a full-scale invasion of their country. We'll be right back.
Let's get started. Bill, where's your mask?
I really tried sleeping with it, everybody. Now I sleep with Inspire.
Inspire? No mask?
Just sleep.
Inspire. Learn more at inspiresleep.com.
At Booking.com, finding perfect isn't rocket science. Kitchen? Sorted. Hot tub? Why not? And of course, puppy friendly. We don't like to say perfect, but it's pretty perfect. Booking.com. Yeah.
Long day, huh? Hey, buddy. You want to Sam Adams? Your cousin. From Boston. Wickets all around. Cheers. Get it, girl. Robots! This is the best night of my life.
When you're the leader in disaster cleanup and restoration, how do you make like it never even happened happen?
Fire it up, Randy.
By being prepared for anything.
Whatever comes your way, there's a pro for that.
Serve Pro, like it never even happened.
Plain aspirin could be hurting your stomach. Basilor 325 liquid-filled aspirin capsule is clinically shown in a 7-day study to cause fewer ulcers than immediate-release aspirin. Basilor, the first liquid-filled aspirin capsules. Amazing.
And they stay there, and they say yeah, and they stay there up, down, up,
Never lose
down,
confidence in how you run your business. Intuit is bringing QuickBooks and MailChimp together to help you set up and grow.
Man, I love this set.
Do your eyes bother you? My eyes feel like a combo of stress, dry, and sandpaper. Stry paper? Luckily, there's BioTrue Hydration Boost Eye Drops. BioTrue uses naturally inspired ingredients and no preservatives. Try BioTrue.
Wonderful pistachios are available without any shells. That's all we're saying.
Oh, really?
Let me try. I speak turtle.
What?
We're so...
That's it!
Okay, let's talk about those changes to your financial plan.
Bill? Mary?
Hey, it's our former broker, Carl.
Carl, say hi to Nina, our Schwab financial consultant.
I know how difficult these calls can be.
Not with Schwab. Nina made it easier to set up our financial plan.
We can check in on it anytime.
It changes when our goals change.
Planning can't be that easy.
Actually, it can be, Carl.
Look forward to planning with Schwab. Psst. 'Cause
Allergies don't have to be scary. Spraying Flonase daily stops your body from overreacting to allergens all season long. Psst, psst. Flonase, all good.
It's true. Everyone gets a free new Samsung Galaxy S22 with a Galaxy trade-in. Any year, any condition.
Really? Even if my old phone looks like this?
Why?
It's okay, people. I've trained for this.
It's not complicated. Everyone gets a free new Samsung Galaxy S22 with the Galaxy trade-in. Any year, any condition.
Certified turbocharger, suspension, and fuel injection.
Translation: certified goosebumps.
Certified from headlamp to tailpipe.
That's certified head turns.
It's all backed by our unlimited mileage warranty.
That means unlimited peace of mind. Mercedes-Benz certified pre-owned. Translation: the Mercedes of your dreams is closer than you think.
Back now with CNN's live coverage of the invasion of Ukraine. I want to get now to CNN's Jim Sciutto. He is live for us in Lviv. Jim, I understand you heard air sirens just moments ago.
That's right, just for the last several minutes, and they faded now, but they were sustained for several minutes here in Lviv. So this would be just the latest city potentially under air attack now. We heard those, of course, earlier in Kyiv, the capital, and this would be truly remarkable, Don, because Lviv here in the western part of the country, there had been some expectation that the Russian invasion would be concentrated in the east, perhaps in the north, where the capital is, the central part of the country, and central south, down in Odessa, where we saw the first strikes in the last couple of hours, missile strikes, artillery strikes. This is the first time we've heard those air raid sirens here. And that would speak to what, again, the latest U.S. military assessment is, intelligence assessment, that Russia's plan is for a full-scale invasion, and that what we're seeing this morning in the early morning hours here in Ukraine are the first steps in that full-scale invasion. So, again, just in the last few minutes here, air raid sirens, sustained air raid sirens in Lviv. And I'll tell you, as I've been watching from the balcony here down in the central part of the old city, folks are walking to work. The cars are still going. The buses are still going here. Remarkably calm, given that this seems to be yet one more Ukrainian city potentially under attack this morning here.
One quick point. When last we left you, when last we spoke, Jim, we talked about troops on the ground. We've gotten the report, and we saw the live stream of the troops entering through Belarus. The U.S. Department of Defense is tracking the reported incursion of troops from Belarus. This is according to our reporting here into Ukraine. The U.S. defense official said Thursday it was not clear if troops were only Russian or also Belarusian. The importance of that, Jim.
It would mean that Ukraine's under attack from two countries now. Remarkable, really. Now, we should note that Belarus is essentially under Moscow's sway, has been for months now, since it's been alleged they stole an election there to keep their man, Lukashenko, in power. But it also speaks to these big military drills, as they were called, exercises that Russia and Belarusian forces were doing jointly. In the last week, there'd been some suspicion on the U.S. side that those drills were not really drills or exercises, but preparation, amassing of forces to enter Ukraine. And if it is indeed confirmed that it is both Russian and Belarusian forces coming across from the north, that would seem to indicate Ukraine is now under attack by two countries. And as we look at that picture, if you put it up again there, Don, of those tanks coming down across the northern border, note this, there'd been a lot of discussion about timing and the shortness of timing for Russia, that it's cold here now, that the frozen ground in the east and to the north was important so that those Russian tanks don't get bogged down in the mud, a genuine threat. But to see Russian tanks, armor, just rolling in on the highways shows you just how massive a force this is, and perhaps that entering the country, those forces entering the country was easier than expected.
Yeah. From Jim Sciutto now. Thank you, Jim, in Lviv. I want to get to Odessa and our Nick Payton-Walsh, who's on the ground there with the very latest. Nick.
Yeah, Don, I mean, it is extraordinary here. We were woken at about 5 a.m. by 3 or 4 explosions, and subsequently, about an hour ago, heard another 2. But at this stage, this strategic port city is still quiet. Signs of police on the streets and concern here, definitely people sort of staying at home. But it's remarkable that we are so far away from the east, from the north, where we've seen these troop movements, heard and felt the likelihood of a threat for days now, but still explosions have been heard here this morning in this key port city. It shows possibly the breadth of the ambition here behind what Russian President Vladimir Putin is possibly getting underway here. And one thing I think it's important to remind our viewers about is his comments in the last hours or so. He says, now, a few important words for those who may be tempted to intervene in ongoing events from the outside. That may be a reference towards NATO or the United States, who he has long falsely used as the justification, their threat, he says, to Russia for possibly moving in here. Whoever tries to interfere with us, and even more so create threats to our country, to our people, should know that Russia's response should be immediate and will lead you to such consequences as you have never experienced in your history. We are ready for any development of events. All necessary decisions in this regard have been made. I hope that I will be heard. Now, that is extraordinary. I mean, for 8 years, we've seen this conflict in Ukraine on the sort of slower, lower level boil. We've seen denied reports of Russian troops going into Crimea, separatists who clearly were being run by Moscow, making their own regions in the east. But today we are seeing an overt invasion by Russia across borders with troops, possibly with the assistance of Belarus too as well, in a scale of which I think anybody who's been observing this conflict thought was utterly unimaginable. And then these comments from Russian President Vladimir Putin essentially threatening consequences that nobody's seen in history before. Utterly chilling, and a different day for European and global security this morning. Dom?
Nick Payton-Walsh joining us from Odessa, Ukraine. Thank you very much for that, Nick. Back with me now, CNN National Security Analyst Steve Hall, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander General Wesley Clark with me as well. General, we spoke earlier, and the situation is a quite different situation now than when we spoke earlier. There was no confirmation of an invasion, and yet here we are, and we've heard from all parties involved.
Yeah, this is pretty much what we expected. First, there's going to be the takeout of the air defense, and that's what it looks like has been done so far. There's sabotage and other things probably going on that we don't know about yet. The first troops have come across the border. We know that. We don't know what's happened in Donbass. Coming in from the north is the most direct way to get into Kyiv. You saw on the video a battalion tactical group moving right down the road. Unless the roads are blocked by Ukrainian forces, they'll be in Kyiv in a few hours. And then, we'll see what happens. I assume that the Ukrainians have defenses out there. It's going to be hard for CNN to capture the sites of that. Hopefully we'll get social media of it or something. But they've got to stop this force coming in, or it'll be over very, very quickly, except for whatever fighting might be coming out in the cities. Now, two other things. Leadership is saying for people to stay in their homes, so they haven't mobilized civil defense yet. And if they don't do that pretty quickly, given the pace of the advance, it's going to be too late. And secondly, you heard the warning to NATO or to the United States not to interfere. So depending on what happens, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the United States and NATO to interfere. Ukraine is the largest force in Europe, other than Turkey. And so that's the toughest nut for Russia to crack. If they take it like this, the rest of NATO, despite the fact that it's NATO, is in a much less defensible position, and especially the Baltic states. So there's a lot riding on this operation right now.
And Steve, in the short time we have left, sum it up for us. We have heard that they promise of bloodshed from some leaders of the President of the United States, saying that this is all of this is on Russia's hands, and we will hold Russia accountable.
Absolutely. We always have to remember how this all started, whether it was Georgia in 2008, whether it was the annexation of Crimea. This is all something that Russia started, and it is indeed on Vladimir Putin's hands. I do think it's something that he would very proudly say, yes, it is. And this is part of my plan geopolitically. I am going to protect my borders by taking over these countries, which is now being made very clear by the images that we're seeing coming out of Ukraine.
General Wesley Clark, Steve Hall, gentlemen, thank you both. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for watching on a very momentous evening here on CNN for the country and for the world. Our live coverage of the attack on Ukraine continues with Michael Holmes in just a moment. I'm Don Lemon in New York.
How would you describe him? How do you explain something this crazy?